So today I'm going to tell you guys why sweatshops play a pivotal role in providing employment in third world countries. Many believe they're inherently wrong because they have low pay according to Western standards. The work conditions are not great, again, according to Western standards. But we have to look at the facts to see how it impacts their society. Today I'm going to tell you a story about a third world country worker named Maria who works in El Salvador. She's fictional, but I've read some stories, and this kind of gives you a look into how they find employment and the other options they have when looking for work. Through my research, I have found credible sources such as Ben Powell, the director of the Free Market Institute, and David Skarbek with the Independent Institute, who I'll be referencing throughout this speech. So the first point is workers who take sweatshop jobs make the choice to work there. This sounds kind of like a silly argument, but choice means a lot. First, I'm going to define a sweatshop. It's often a garment factory with low pay, according to Western standards, long hours, and not ideal conditions. So this choice is very pivotal when thinking about this because they have to think about, okay, what alternatives do they have besides sweatshop work? Usually the alternatives in these rural communities or in places like El Salvador or Bangladesh is prostitution, begging, or agricultural work. In 9 out of 10 countries, working 10-hour days in the garment industry lifts employees above the $2 pay threshold. In half the countries, it results in earning more than 3 times the national average. So when we think about they have low pay, yes, they're not making $10 an hour like some of us are, which might be low for us, but $2 is a lot to them. So here we'll pick up our story with Maria, who's an El Salvadoran worker. She has 3 options. She can go to work in a farm out in the heat all day where she doesn't really know how much she'll make, but she's thinking that it'll be below $1. She can work in a sweatshop where she knows the hours are going to be very long. It's going to be tedious work, but she kind of knows that she'll be making around $2 and she can feed her family. Or she can go to the streets and beg or try prostitution, which is very unstable, very dangerous, and can result in a lot of different things. So next, sweatshops can be dangerous, but the alternative is often much worse. As I mentioned earlier, we always have to look at the alternative to what they have, because if we just eliminate sweatshops completely, then they're left with the next worst option. So many who disagree with this point look at accidents that happened in Rana Plaza in Bangladesh, where a building collapsed, a sweatshop building collapsed, and it killed 1,000 people. So we can't overlook things like this. They're terrible tragedies, but then we also have to look at the overall facts, and we can't just look at one specific time where many people died, which is of course terrible, but looking at the facts will kind of give us a better point of view. So the International Labor Organization did a study and estimated that people who work in agricultural work suffer around 250 million accidents every year. Out of 335,000 fatal workplace accidents, close to 170,000 are from agricultural jobs. So this is a staggering number because they're out in the heat all day. There's no safety precautions and often old, rickety equipment, which leads to malfunctions and people get hurt. And oftentimes they don't have the treatment needed to deal with some of these injuries. So we'll go back to Maria's story. So she's considered the first point about pay, and now she's thinking about, okay, how am I going to stay safe? She knows that the sweatshop is going to be hard work. There might be accidents that happen because accidents do happen when working in places like this in third world countries with not great equipment. But she knows that sweatshops, the injury rate is a little bit lower. She's thinking about going to work on a farm, but she's seen some of her friends get injured, and even some of them die. And then she thinks about the streets, but we don't really have numbers on that because it's basically a black market, and they can do whatever they want to out there. So sweatshops have been proven to be specifically good on women, or specifically have a specifically good impact on women. This might sound kind of absurd because people say, well, how can a sweatshop have a good impact on a woman? if they're just subjecting them to work. But studies by the University of Washington show that women are less likely to become pregnant or married off for money. Also, 38% higher school enrollment because families can afford to send their kids to school. And also, it provides people with a practical skill, usually sewing. But these three things really come into play when people are deciding where to work, because if they can send their kids to school and not be married off for money, it improves your lifestyle. And 38% higher is a pretty big number. So we'll go back to Maria again. So she's thinking, okay, what am I gonna do after I get this job? And she thinks, okay, I have a life skill, I can take this home, use it for my family, I'll have enough money to send my kids to school. And then she thinks about agricultural work, where once you get in that work, it's very hard to get out of that work because you don't have other schools or other skills. You'll most likely be farming for the rest of your life or doing something else in the agricultural sector. Then again, she thinks about the streets, but it's extremely unstable again, and you really have no options after that because you have no life skills, very little money, and anything can happen to you out there. So in conclusion, Maria has made her decision. She decided to go work in a sweatshop where she knows the hours will be long and the pay won't be great according to what we make, but she knows that she'll be able to feed her family and maybe send her kids to school. Sweatshops are not ideal, but simply eliminating them places many with the next worst option. This is not about corporate wealth, but what is realistic for countries without employment options like the U.S. And I have this little clip right here. Yes.
In 1993, Senator Tom Harkin proposed banning all products that were made with child labor from coming into the United States. The result, according to Oxfam, is that thousands, quote, became prostitutes or starved. I'm Ben Powell, an economist at Suffolk University, and I'm going to talk to you about sweatshops. Defending sweatshops is not about defending corporate profits, economic efficiency. It's about the welfare of the third world workers. And I think first we should say what we mean by a sweatshop. It's a place in the third world with very low pay by our Western standards and very poor working conditions, both health, safety, long hours of work, predictability of overtime, maybe lack of breaks or bathroom breaks, vacation time, many days a week, all of those things. With the appalling working conditions that they are, the workers still choose to work there, and that choice is important. Them choosing to work there demonstrates that they think it's better than the alternatives available to them. And the other alternatives are often much worse. It could be scavenging, begging, or even prostitution. Let's take Cambodia, for example. There's a trash dump there where workers earn about 75 workers, it's actually an exaggeration, where people scavenging earn about 75 cents a day for their efforts in the broiling sun. But yet, working in a sweatshop there can earn workers as much as $2 a day. This is a much better alternative to that. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that this is all we want these workers to aspire to. Of course we should want their lives to be better and them to be able to earn more. But it does mean that we have to be very careful what you agitate for, that you don't eliminate the sweatshop job to throw them into some much worse alternative that's out there.
So I know it's kind of difficult to wrap our heads around a sweatshop being good, and I don't necessarily agree that it's moral, but I do agree that it provides employment to people who need it in a situation where they might not have the opportunities that